You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Hello and welcome to TFM's local books and comic show for Star Trek, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm just one of the hosts, Matthew Rushing, and I'm so glad to have back with me the wonderful, gracious, beautiful Bruce Gibson.
Hi, I am beautiful. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, yes, it is true. I'm just excited to have you back fresh off of your successful panel there at the latest Star Trek convention. This one was held in Chicago. You had a books panel, and Bruce, you had some news, but we'll get to that in a second because we'll have you break the news here for everybody who wasn't paying attention, which I can't imagine anybody listening to the show wasn't paying attention. But with us as well, we've got back Casey. Casey, I'm so glad you're here because we're going to be finishing up the Left Hand of Destiny series today.
Yes, I'm excited to get into it, and as I gaze upon Bruce's countenance and his lovely visage.
I mean, we're just blessed to be in his presence here on Zoom.
It's hard. It's hard when he's not here that we have to look at each other.
True. It's true. Whoa, Bruce. Keep it together.
Shirt stays on.
I'm so glad this isn't a video podcast for people. But Bruce, so what was the big news that came from your books and comics panel?
It's that I got through the whole thing. That's what the big news is.
Yay!
No, so the big news is one of the panelists was author John Jackson Miller. And, you know, he's written some Star Trek stuff before. And so,
he has.
Yeah, we announced a new novel that is coming out this November on November 6th. And November 8th. That's a little too soon. November 6th. It's November 8th, and it's a Strange New Worlds novel called The High Country. And Pike gets a horse.
Ooh.
Which is it's super exciting. I mean, who doesn't want to see a man about a horse, especially a captain? And Casey, did you get a chance also to see the cover for this as well that he put out on Twitter?
I did. I'm excited for it. I'm hoping it's better than the other space westerns that we've been reading through recently in the New Earth series. But yes, I don't know what to say about it. I'm excited.
I love that you said space western because that's exactly what it is. I mean, John was telling me that he always wants to do a different style of book. And so, like, his Rios book was kind of more of a mystery book. Enterprise War is more of a war book. This is a western book. So it definitely does have a western feel to it.
And I'm excited about this. I love John Jackson Miller, and the cover is very nice for this. And his Picard novel, Rogue Elements, I thought was a phenomenal book, actually. And of course, really, I think gave us insight into the character of Rios, which was great. And so I can't wait to see what he's going to do here. And mainly because, the trailers for Strange New Worlds really give us a sense that Pike is in a kind of an interesting headspace as to, why is he on a horse in the first place? It seems like he's being brought back to Starfleet, which is an interesting thing since, we also know from the Cage, he's like, I'm kind of ready to give this up. And so does he have that happen frequently. I mean, what's going on with this guy? So it looks like we're going to get the opportunity to really dig into that more with his book and give maybe some context, even more so, to season 1, which will have ended by that point. So yeah, I'm very excited for this. So and hopefully we'll get more book news coming soon. So
and I can tell you will be. That's all I can say.
Yes, it's true. I actually know that too. I wasn't going to say anything, but yes, we have the same source on that, Bruce. And so, but that is exciting that is going to be coming. We are going to be getting more books and book news coming, which is great. But we also had some comic releases this week that we're going to be diving into. So I wanted to get into Mirror War 5 with you guys, because this one, y'all, I don't even know what's happening in this comic anymore. Because we time jumped 2 years from the last issue, and what did you guys think?
It's a lot more of the same, for sure. They're 2 years in the future and still building ships and still trying to take over the world, I guess.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing we do every night. Try to take over the universe.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just all over the place. Yeah, got Shelby in it, I guess. I mean, Admiral Nagura, not Nagura, Admiral Nechayev.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were there.
Casey's doing a very good job of giving us a painting of what you can expect in his comic.
That's exactly what you can expect. They're in it. Yeah, I was. I'm in the same place I have been for all these. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I care about these characters or what they're doing. So they've got dilithium now for their ships. Okay, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I actually enjoyed this issue a little more than the other ones, and maybe it's just because I know what to expect. I don't know. I mean,
so you know not to expect anything.
I don't know. I think because it jumped 2 years ahead, and I remember thinking, wait, did I miss something? Did it really just jump 2 years ahead? But to me, it almost made a fresh start. Okay, well, this is starting maybe another story. And yeah, it kind of is repetitive with the others. But I was liking the fact that Picard is basically still failing in the eyes of the Empire. And he's still trying to do whatever he can to keep, trying to win, to keep his ship, to try to do whatever it is. And we even have a facepalm. We have a Mirror Universe facepalm in here, a Picard, which was really thrilling on so many levels. But I don't know. It was just it's like the others. I don't know. There isn't the goal's the same thing. Picard's trying to take lead of the Empire and not really able to achieve anything. He's not really getting there yet. Would you say that's what the comic is doing? It's not getting there yet?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we are in this constant place with this comic over and over and over again where we're not actually moving anywhere. And it's weird. It's real weird. Because I don't know, and you guys can help me out with this, but I legitimately don't know if I've ever read a comic where I feel like less has happened. And that is very, very strange to me that, I think one of the things that we've mentioned over and over again is we don't know why we're reading the story, because nothing in the story seems to really be happening. And, we time jump, and so you would think that something interesting had happened in that time, but really it's just kind of more of the same in the sense that I don't have a sense of where this story is headed. Casey, maybe you'll like this. I feel like it's the phase 4 of the MCU. I don't really know where this is going. But we just keep putting out content. And so that's what this feels like. We just keep putting out an issue, but every issue leads me to ask the same question, which is, why are we telling the story? So maybe it'll all wrap up and it'll all make sense soon, which I think would be great.
Well, that's a really good analogy, I feel like, with the phase 4 of the MCU, because, yeah, as I watch through all those things, it's like, even in the first phases of the MCU, you were going with the Infinity Stones and Thanos, and that was the direction it was going. Yeah, and this comic series really is following the phase 4 of just like, let's throw some stories out there. Some of them maybe aren't the greatest in the world, and I feel like from the first issue of this comic series, we don't know where chronologically it takes place in the MCU. I think it's kind of before the episodes of Deep Space Nine that we had, maybe. So if that's the case, we kind of know that Picard's probably not gonna succeed, which once you get to the end of 10 issues of a comic, what was the point of that? But even some of the story elements in even just this one issue in particular, I feel like there was just almost too much they were trying to put in here that didn't need to happen. I mean, they could have had an entire issue just about them trying to get the dilithium for all their ships, but they spent like 2 pages on it, and their plan worked according to plan, like perfectly. And the same thing with Data, with whatever his mission was, crash landing on that planet, and just everything going perfectly according to plan. They could have drawn some of these out and added some more suspense, like, we're going to kill off a character here, or what's going to happen. And then at the end of the issue, okay, we've won this battle and gotten this dilithium, and now on to the next phase of whatever our plan is that hopefully we would have established if this had been better outlined, I feel like.
I don't know what to say, because Scott and David Tipton have written so many Star Trek comics, and so many of them have been so good, and I don't, it's not the writing so much, it's just that, it's like you were saying, it's not really going anywhere. I mean, if you read the first issue, really what's happening in the first issue is the same thing that's happening here in the 5th issue. It's just that whole thing of they're trying to build a fleet, and they want to take control of the Empire, and the Empire doesn't trust them, doesn't think they're doing a good job, they're failing at it, and Picard getting pissed off. And I will have my way, I will make this work. Yeah. And like every issue is a pissed off Picard that he's going to win at some point, and that's all we seem to be getting. And again, I don't know why I kind of enjoyed this one a little more, maybe because it I don't know. Maybe because when you put Data in a capsule, it kind of seems silly to me, and so I was just reading it for the silly parts of it.
Yeah.
In addition to the mirror Picard facepalm, I also just happened to notice as I'm flipping through it again that the Klingons have pink blood, as we know they did at least in the Star Trek VI era.
Nice. So, okay, now that ups my rating.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. Well, so we had the other comic that came out, which I'm very interested to hear both of your takes here, as we are back in the 32nd century with Discovery and their adventures here with issue 2. And so what did you guys think about this latest issue of Adventures in the 32nd century? It's like I feel like, you have to say it like that because, it sounds like a Buck Rogers episode.
But I feel like that these issues are a little less ominous or adventure packed as you might expect. This one was an interesting one. It focused on Adira and really their life before Discovery showed up. And so what's interesting too is that it was a lot of exposition, I guess, and not a lot of dialogue. It's more of their thoughts or like a log entry or something like that. And then some dialogue with some of the characters, but really just kind of a snapshot of who this character is before they came on to Star Trek Discovery, which I don't know. I mean, I felt like it was kind of a good little story, filled in maybe a couple small gaps. I don't feel like I was missing anything about the character before this comic, but at the same time, I feel like this did a good job of adding a little bit of depth to Adira.
Yeah, I liked seeing the generation ship and the mission that they're on, and Adira's part of that mission, and so is Gray, and how important it was to Adira and even to Gray to hope and that the Federation would reestablish. It was like this dream that the Federation could be its thing again someday, and that they could be a part of it. And of course, then we know that happens, and we see that at the end. But this is all stuff that we know. But yeah, it's like seeing the events that happened before what we saw happen on Discovery was pretty interesting. And just the relationship between the two characters and what Gray does to the replicator with the apples, and seeing...
Should have been hot bananas, but...
Exactly. But Sanal Tal, we get to see him in this, and then the whole transfer. But of course, we know all this stuff. But it's kind of just taking that storyline we know about and just telling the full story of it. You know, I mean, there's not a whole lot here, but it's a simple story. And if you like the characters of Adira and Gray, I definitely recommend this.
Yeah. And I think I like one of the things you said, that Adira really holds those Starfleet and Federation values. And even after the burn, was really feeling like had this hope that the Federation was going to show back up and that they were going to be reunited. You know, the Federation was going to be reunited, and lo and behold, that actually happens. You know, and this story actually made me glad that Adira got to experience that, just because of, I don't know, the loyalty or just the ideals, I guess, that they hold, that they get to experience now, because the Federation and Starfleet's back together, and almost makes you, I guess, understand the character a little bit more on the show, on how kind of excited and zany and whatever that they get, that, you know, Mary Wiseman's character, Tilly, used to kind of be like in the first seasons. And so this almost kind of, even though Adira's a little bit more subdued in the comic, like some of that excitement coming out in the show makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, I definitely agree. If you like Adira and Gray and those, you know, that story, this is a definite should read.
Well, everything we know about Adira has, you know, they have the symbiont in them.
Mm-hmm.
And when this issue started and they're leaving Earth, I'm like, what are they doing on Earth? And I keep forgetting that Adira is a human from Earth, because
right.
I still think sometimes of Adira as a Trill, but they're not a Trill, you know, but they have a Trill symbiont in them. So I was like, oh yeah, duh. I mean, I know it, but it's just, we just haven't really seen much of this character prior to that. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. As far as ratings, I, you know, it's kind of like the last one, you know, I think, you know, with the Grudge story, it was a little tough to rate, just because it was that one was, I guess, just an oddball story anyway. But this is just, since it's a kind of a one shot on this character, it's a good story, but it's hard to like compare it with anything. But I guess just comparing it with itself, I'll give it a 4 Trill symbionts out of 5.
Yeah, because it focuses on these two characters and it kind of leads into what you see in Discovery. I'll give this 4.5 out of 5 apples eaten. So there's just an apple and a half left.
Or a half an apple? Are you on the 6-star rating, 6 apple rating?
No. No, you're right. Just a half an apple left. Yeah, the other one's for the teacher.
Okay.
Well, guys, I don't know about you, but maybe we should hop over into the feature and shake the left hand of destiny. Well, we are here at book 2 of the Left Hand of Destiny, and so we'll be wrapping up this duology this week. And I was really interested in this book, and one of the things we had kind of talked about as we discussed the first one was, you know, why Ezri was here, you know, because she doesn't get a lot to do in that first book, and in fact, she's just really in the end of the book. But here, I really loved the way that this book utilizes her character and the fact that she is not Genzia. To the utmost in this story, and that she brings a perspective here about Klingons that is actually going to be really important for where this story is going, which is all about kind of a Klingon reformation, one might call it.
Yeah, my very first note on this book was it's interesting to start a Martok story with Ezri, because she's like the first thing that we're reading is her. And so she was the one in season 7 of Deep Space Nine who told Worf that maybe the Klingon Empire is ready to die or to be reborn. And we're seeing. So
you're saying it's a good day to die?
It might be a good day to die. It's a good day for an empire to die, perhaps. But she's for her to be here to witness it, but also to help it. I mean, I think one of the last things that the book says, or in the last chapter, is that nobody knew it yet, but in the future they would say that this was the day that the Klingon Empire was reborn. And so her knowledge of Klingons from Curzon, and then even from Jadzia, obviously being married to Worf, was an interesting perspective that we got in the show, but now even more here, I feel like, because she's still that character that's kind of questioning herself as a symbiont, and are these memories hers, or she says at one point, I'm just going to have to trust the slug. And so she's still like, I feel like this is just a good Ezri story, because she's still, she's still trying to find herself, I think, in all this. And in the meantime, trying to help her family in the Klingon Empire, I guess, do that too, find themselves, help Martok find himself, and in any way she can. And she's so resolute with her decision to go that she just, she's practically lying to Kira, even though Kira knows exactly what's up, about going. But she just knows that she's got this blood oath that Jadzia had, that Curzon had, that she's going to stick with her family. And I thought, her being there was a little weird in the last book, but in this one I felt like was totally justified.
I was thrilled to see her starting off the book, because, yeah, we didn't get much of her in the first one, but seeing her in the second one, I really wanted to get a lot of Ezri, and we do get quite a bit of her in this, and so I was really happy about that. And, as you're talking through this, Casey and Matt, even when you started off, I thought, she really does reflect what this book is about, right? It's like she understands the Klingon culture because of the past lives of Dax, but she doesn't necessarily has participated in it, but her view of it is that, yeah, things have got to change, or maybe the path the Klingons took has, they've gone off of that path in the direction they should have gone, and she knows that maybe she needs to help to correct that. But I like at the same time that she is who she is, but when she has to bring that Klingon sense out of her to deal with situations like with Martok's wife, Sorella, and she stands up to her and proves her point, and Sorella's kind of like, yeah, okay, I like this one. She can bring that out of her. So this was, yeah, definitely a good place to put Ezri in for her next growth path. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought that it was also nice just because Worf and Jadzia, having gone on the quest to find the Sword of Kahless and then dumping it into space, and then them having to try and find it here, it made sense as well, just from a logistical standpoint, as to why Worf would need her here. And I think I love what you said, Bruce, about the way in which she can summon the memories of Curzon or Jadzia to challenge people in a very Klingon way. And yet she understands the flaws of the Klingon philosophy at the moment. There's that great moment. We'll talk about a little bit more later, but she's talking about why, glorious battle doesn't really matter unless the battle has a point. Death is only glorious with a well-lived life, she says. By itself, death is only death. And so she is able to express exactly what Martok has been feeling, what the other characters in the story that we meet are saying about what's wrong with the Klingon Empire, and then it's a character who's saying it that we, believe in and trust as readers because of our experience with Deep Space Nine. So I thought that was a lot of fun to have her here, and it was nice to see her be able to actually see, like, the fruition of the things that she had talked to Worf about. It's not easy for them to, be together all the time because of the history, but I felt like she deserves to have seen this play out as much as any character here because of her connection with all of these characters, which I think is really cool. So I think, when I think of Jeff Lang and J.G. Hertzler putting this story together, really, I think they thought a lot about what characters they would want to use in this story, and they utilized them very, very well.
The other thing I like is that she is the only non-Klingon character in these Klingon situations. So we get a perspective of someone who's not Klingon in these Klingon environments. She's like the, Marilyn Munster of the group, So she's the only one that's got that perspective of, I'm not Klingon. I'm the only one here that's not Klingon. So we get those perspectives from her.
Well, and we do get that. There's the Ferengi.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Yeah, far. And but I mean, still, okay, so two characters that are not Klingon, and she's, though, the only one that's really pushing against them, I guess, pushing their boundaries of their thoughts and their beliefs. Because with the Ferengi, he's actually almost acting more like a Klingon, or, because he doesn't really have a family. He doesn't believe that he's going to get into the Ferengi equivalent of heaven or Sto-vo-kor or whatever. He says he can't afford it, and so, like, by the end of the book, he's asking Martok to help him get into Sto-vo-kor. So he's almost like, taking on these Klingon values. But yeah, with Ezri, she's really is an outsider that's looking in and judging the Klingon values and saying, maybe things need to be different. And yeah, Matthew, like you said, getting to watch this play out, I think is great for her character, for Ezri, but also for Dax, who's been involved with the Klingons for so long. Yeah.
Well, and on that, I think one of the things that leads me to thinking of is the way in which family is such an important part of this. Martok legitimately loses most of his family. He loses his wife, he loses his daughters, only his son survives, and yet he does have this family in Worf and Alexander, Ezri. You've got, Darok, and, you mentioned the Ferengi, Farah. I think it's Farah. Anyway, but, I think that's something that is really, really interesting. And in many ways, I was kind of thinking about that idea that for Martok, he does kind of become the father of the new Klingon Empire, and so in some ways, his family is now, all of Kronos, all Klingons that are now alive, because he's the one who's going to be kind of help shepherding them into this new era, and this rediscovery of what it actually means to be Klingon. So I found that really fascinating in this idea of what, we see here with family.
Yeah. In the last book, we kind of had a love fest as we talked about Martok. And I feel like in this one, that's just another thing that I love about this character, is that during Deep Space Nine, we saw Martok and Worf really bond as brothers, to the point where Martok invited Worf, an outcast, into his house, meaning that Alexander, who Worf had, I don't even think you could call it a relationship with Alexander, but Alexander by extension came part of the house, and Jadzia did, and then by extension Ezri is part of the house as well, and Martok even says so, that you're still a daughter or sister or whatever of this house. And Martok is such a new kind of Klingon that's kind of almost refreshing to see that I think he loves the old ways, but is not so entrenched in them that he's blinded by it. I mean, obviously he's pretty much leading a revolution, and he's also not so, I don't know if xenophobic is the right word, but he's willing to let outsiders in, like with Ezri and with the Ferengi Far. And with the Ferengi, I mean, like the way we've seen them portrayed in all of Star Trek really is just kind of the bumbling idiots almost, and to see this one that comes in kind of acting like that at the beginning, but Martok, although annoyed by him, really, he lets him come along. He doesn't, shoo him off, or even if he does, Far comes back, and Martok is pleased by that, and welcomes him in, and even dedicates a battle to him. And, he's like the perfect father figure, I think, for this group of people, but also for the Klingon Empire in general, because I think he's just such a good example to set for the people.
Yeah, he is a good father figure. Like you're saying about Far, I was just thinking about how, I didn't really think of him as a father figure too far, but that probably is the best way to describe it. But I was trying to think maybe older brother or something, but that doesn't, it's almost like maybe even like an uncle to a nephew that he really can't stand, but then eventually, kind of takes him under his wing, because the relationship and the respect then is earned. It wasn't just something that naturally came about, and it just grew over time. But, his relationship with these other characters, it's interesting how he brings others into his house, and yet, they're not necessarily all Klingon, like we've talked about with Ezri and Far, or Farah, or whatever his name is. But, it's like he loses his blood family, and then he brings in the surrogate family into his life. And they don't necessarily replace those that he loves, but it just shows that he can have a house built with people that he can trust, and they can not just trust him, but rely on him to make the right decisions, just like you might look at your father to send the family on the right direction.
Now, I mean, I think it's really interesting because, this whole series, these two books really have been kind of about the fact that, and I think Casey, you rightly mentioned that this is something that was pinpointed by Ezri back in the series, but there is a Klingon sickness, and they have forgotten what it means to be Klingons because they have spent too much time in stories and songs which exaggerate what it means without actually kind of understanding the truth of their past. There is this great section where they talk about that the Klingons had improperly channeled the energies that would ignite the galaxy, turning all against them. They possessed all the attributes they needed to become the great people they hungered to be, but they were out of balance. That they had paid lip service to the concepts of discipline and honor, but their actions had become a sad pantomime, their hearts locked in the past. In the end, brute force is not enough to survive. And there's so much in this book where so many people, I even pulled out a ton of quotes in there on our outline, but there was so much here where they had rightly diagnosed the sickness that the Klingons have been experiencing for so many years. And by doing that, I think what it was going to take for them to turn it around. And when I joked in many ways that this is a Klingon reformation, I mean, it very much, this two-part story is very akin to what we see happen in Enterprise, I think, with the Vulcans, where they have lost what it means to be truly Vulcan, and they need a reawakening. And the Klingons the same way, except for them, theirs is much more bloody, and they need to get, hit over the head with a bat'leth a few times to really understand, how much they've lost and what it's going to take to get it back. So I loved that this part of the story, that we took something from the end of Deep Space Nine and we really built on it to create a new Klingon empire that is truly going to be something that, as we then moved on in the rest of the Litverse, I mean, the Klingon Empire became this incredible ally of the Federation in a way that was only a dream in the mind of Gorkon years and years past.
It's interesting because, especially since we have the clone emperor of Kahless, a lot is talked about the old ways, or what Kahless tried to teach them when in his original life, and even the meaning of honor, and how that was something that kind of came later. And I feel like almost that this book is trying to address, in some of these conversations that people are having, is that not only have the Klingons lost their way, but it's almost like saying us as viewers or the writers of the shows made them so like a monoculture of warriors. But we even see that there's monks, which we saw in the shows, but that, with, commerce, the Ferengi was a great example of, dealing with commerce. And, one of the quotes that you have, in our outline here is about that, like, why isn't commerce a warrior's concern? And talking about, like, they should know where their house gets their money, because especially if there's, they're kind of getting their money or their wealth, or they're getting their power by nefarious means that are not honorable, and just showing that, like, there are other aspects to the Klingon culture that I think a lot of people have forgotten. And I think that includes breaking the fourth wall. As us as readers and us as fans of the show, we think of Klingons, we think of warriors, but we don't really think about some of these deep beliefs that they've got, the ones that are truly rooted in their past. And especially where it comes to Kahless and what he tried to impart on the Klingons, not necessarily just about battle for battle's sake, or for, just jumping into battle because you want to battle. Like a battle without a goal is just chaos, and chaos leads to death. It makes me think of our Mirror War comics that we're reading. It's without an end goal in sight. It's just chaos. And, I just feel like it did such a good job of shedding light on, I think, some of those things about this monoculture that we've seen, throughout the years in Star Trek, and really does give them a good jumping off point to go as they, this is at the very beginning of our 24th century literature that really takes off from here. And, like you said, Matthew, the Klingons really become almost like a more well-developed culture, I feel like, after this.
You guys are saying everything that I'm thinking. Like, I start to think it, and then you say it, and I'm just like, yes. Because, and I was thinking of the Vulcans of Enterprise too, Matt, before you brought them up. But yeah, it's like when we watch the series, as these progress, they bring the Vulcans into the shows, they bring the Klingons into the shows, and we get several episodes, and they've done a good job developing them. But as time goes on, and you do more stories, you get to develop these beings into something more than just this flat one-dimensional thing. And if you were to ask somebody, what is a Klingon, someone would say, oh, well, they're warriors and they're about honor. But there's more to it than that. You can't just be a species of being warriors and honor. There's more depth to it. And I feel like this book is calling that out and saying, maybe Klingons lost their way, because they're more than just that. And they themselves have to realize that they are more than just that there's more to it than just honor. And what does honor really mean? And who is it that you really have to trust. And what is fear? Fear is another thing that comes up, and fear is really about acknowledging the fear within yourself and not just abandoning fear altogether. You know, I need my pain, as Kirk says, right? And the Klingons need it too. That's how you're going to develop and find yourself and become a more enriched society, if you acknowledge that instead of being this just one flat mission. And I think this book does a good job with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that you're saying that, Bruce, because, you know, it's one of the things that they say, and it was well in the book, this lost wisdom of Kahless. The greatest lesson that he taught us was this: we Klingons should fear nothing except ourselves. No one could destroy us except ourselves. This was the harsh lesson, one that our people have forgotten. This is why this is so, we cannot say, but we Katai have made it our law. We do not forget. And I love that, because this is why it is so important to rightly understand, you know, one's history. And to not sensationalize it or to downplay it in any way, but to have a correct understanding of it so that we don't forget important lessons. We don't forget who we are. And that's something that Klingons have done here. And so they do need this, you know, come to Kahless moment to be able to rightly understand where they truly are, so that they can understand where they need to go. And I think this book is phenomenal in that sense, because one of the beauties of Deep Space Nine was breaking the monocultures of the societies. Especially, we saw that, you know, they did that a great job with obviously the Cardassians and the Bajorans, but they even began to do that with the Klingons as well. And so this book series, I think, just does such a fantastic job of continuing that legacy. And that's one of the things that, you know, I think we all as fans who read these books, this is why we really loved the best of them, because they continued the story in a way that not only felt like a logical progression from where we left the show, but then they also took the characters and places and these races and different cultures and places that we wanted to see them be able to go as well, and really explored the full potential that they had. So, yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that. And one of the other things here, too, is that we finally get a full understanding of who the enemy is here with Gothmara and her son Morjod, and exactly who she is, which I was very interested to realize that basically she's just a Klingon Bene Gesserit.
I had to look up that reference.
So
I'm a bad
nerd. Dune, in Dune, the Bene Gesserit are characters that, one, they have the ability to use what they call the voice, which they can control people with. So we see that. But also, they are geneticists who are working by mixing humanity's bloodlines to create the perfect person to lead them into the future. And, you know, so we kind of see her do this with the idea that she's the one who helped create Kahless, the clone, to undermine Gowron and create a civil war. And then, of course, you know, she creates Morjod as another plan to take over the Empire, as well as the Herc that will obey her. And then, of course, we find out that not only has she created the Herc from the past, but she spliced them with now Klingon DNA, which is terrifying. And so I found her to be not only obviously crazy, but a really good villain in the sense that she is a different type of villain for the Klingon Empire.
Well, yeah, because in the first book, I thought she was just a nut. She was just this, you know, villain that's trying to take over the Empire and ha ha ha. But then we see the brilliance of her planning. And like you said, she's not maybe all the way there, you know, mentally, but she is brilliant in how she puts all this stuff together and how she brings her son into it and these creatures and such and everything in here. I mean, she took years and years of planning. This wasn't something she just did overnight or within a year. you know? And so she was patient, which is amazing to me in a lot of ways because she doesn't seem all that patient now in the book, but she was patient to get to this point.
Yeah, and I kind of like when the authors can take little bits of information that we've gotten throughout Star Trek and tie it together with one thing, like with Gothmara being the one that created the clone of Kahless. Like, we didn't need that. She didn't have to have done that. Like, that wasn't something like, you know, according to the monks in whichever episode that was of Next Generation where he came back, they created him. But obviously she was there with the monks helping do this and, you know, doing something, you know, with her plan that Martok had seen many years ago. But, man, yeah, I feel like this book really fleshed out her character a lot better. And, I mean, even her son Morjod at the end of the book, or at the end of his life, really, he turned into a Herc, and that was like a gruesome scene as it was written.
I love that part.
Yeah, and but also just even more solidified how really evil, I guess, that Gothmara was, that she would do that to her own son, either while he was still in the womb or after he was born, or who knows, you know, or if he was born in vitro or whatever, you know, like, but, you know, even leading up to that, you know, we're getting in her head a little bit and finding out that he is just another tool for her. Like, she does not love him as a son. Even Martok is starting to think of him as his son. Like, he keeps referring to him as my son, you know, from time to time when he's talking to other people, rather than distancing himself from that. He's almost taking responsibility for this, you know, youthful indiscretion, I think we called it the last time, you know, from his past. And, yeah, this lady's nuts, though. I mean, I don't know exactly, you know, where she thought this was going to go. If, like, the whole Klingon, like, because I don't think that she ever had any thoughts that she would be the ruler of the Klingon Empire. I think she was literally just, you know, some people just like to watch the world burn, as the Joker would tell us. I think that's kind of what I got from this character.
Yeah, I felt like she was going to have her son lead, but she's pulling the strings, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I love how Morjod, her son, figures this out, like, at the end. Like,
yeah,
you know, he knows that his mother was in the wrong, but it took to the very end of his life to figure that out.
Yeah, I thought that this was, you know, great because you see her as a character who, you know, in the end, it really did come down for her. She wanted to destroy Martok for destroying her family, right? And exposing the fact that, you know, they were creating bioweapons in the era of Gorkon's peace. None of that was needed. And they had actually wanted Martok, you know, because he was a tactical genius and they wanted his help. And, you know, he wasn't going to go along with that. So, you know, I just, I think she turns out to be a really interesting villain and kind of just a terrifying one because it shows what, you know, somebody could do that has no conscience and they just start experimenting, you know, genetically, and it's terrifying. So one of the things, of course, and I think probably the biggest thing about this book is that this is about a second coming. You know, Martok is the new Kahless. He's the Klingon Messiah who was healed in 3 days. You know, I mean, it was funny because as we're recording, we just had Easter happen. And so, I mean, all the allusions to him being this kind of Klingon Messiah, you know, he doesn't have 12 followers. He has 13 followers as the guy who are left, which was interesting. Very Klingon to have 13 instead of 12. So I thought that this was great, though, by them introducing this idea that there was this remnant of Katai who were left over, who are the Firebringers, the last embers of what it truly means to be Klingon, who are the builders and the teachers and the last true disciples of Kahless. And it turns out Martok's father was part of this. And so, you know, I think I loved the way that they worked all of this in. And again, I think it's something that kind of legitimizes where they want to go with the Klingons, that working this idea and that, no, that they are missing something. And what they're missing is this, this truth of understanding what it means to be Klingon, as we were talking about beforehand. And then kind of tying in people that can then help them reclaim that. It's not just Martok, but there are others as well.
Yeah, I until I saw this in the outline as Martok as the Klingon Messiah, that had not even occurred to me, but I had to smile as I saw that in there, and as you were talking about it, just because it's, I don't know if they necessarily intended, and I really doubt that the writers of Deep Space Nine intended for Martok to have this type of role, but I mean, Martok, has that kind of Christ analogy anyway, like more than even just being healed in 3 days, or, I mean, he came out of nothing, he came from, a family that didn't have much. He's kind of, he's not without sin for sure, like Martok is not, but he grows up and he's always trying to do the right thing. Like, even, when he's in the Dominion prison camp and having to fight, he's not going to just let himself die, but he's also not going to, let anybody else die. Like, he fought so that others didn't have to. And he, even after the war, he had the chancellorship thrust upon him and didn't want it. He was kind of a reluctant leader. And I feel like it just made him the perfect leader of this new empire. And having these teachers, these Katai, and then also finding out that his father was one too. He thought his father was a nobody. He came from the Kethel lowlands. He thought his family were nobodies, but to find out that his family is also steeped in this tradition too, that remember the way the Klingons, I guess, should be, and can help lead others and teach others that way. He's, I don't know. Yeah, it just made me love Martok even more throughout this.
The Katai were so cool to me because they are so different from the standard Klingons in this group, and it's kind of mystical and old and the traditional ways, and these caverns and things that they've been in, the snowy planet, all this stuff. It's just, they're like, the monks, and it's so different, and I always find them to be cool. But the whole idea of the old way and the Klingons losing their way, and it's like Kahless is the spark in a sense that really captures the attention of the Klingons, that there may be hope beyond what they already know. And so he's the symbol, but he can't carry it through all the way. And so he passes it on to Martok to continue to be that symbol of hope and of this new way, which is kind of the old way. But it's not just being the symbol, but the symbol that can lead. And that's the strength that Martok has. And just seeing who's behind him, who's working with him from the Katai and the group of characters we talked earlier, they're just the right group to have behind him to kind of push him, because he doesn't think that much of himself, he undermines himself, and they're just there to just kind of push him and say, yeah, you can lead. You're the one to do this.
I think that, the thing about Martok is that, obviously he doesn't want this, but he's had it thrust upon him. But his idea of what it means to Klingon, he doesn't realize it, but it had been shaped by his father, and it is much closer to, and he didn't realize, the Katai and what they believe about what Kahless had originally taught them, what it means to be Klingon. And so you have this whole thing, and it's really beautiful. Again, there's a lot of spirituality for the Klingons here that I think is really cool. But this destiny that he has been prepared for all his life, he just didn't know it. And so it does make him the perfect Klingon Messiah to lead them into a whole, it's not a new way of thinking, but it's the right way of thinking for Klingons, and it's going to make the Klingons a culture and a species here that will be a benefit to their neighbors and their friends in a way that they could never have been before. They're putting away the corruption that has, taken over for so many years and finding their way back, which, it's just so good. And in all honesty, I was just really struck by how this book really brought to a close this storyline. And I think it did a fantastic job of making the Klingons as a species just so much more interesting. Because we deconstruct them and we put them back together in a way that means that it would be much more interesting to see Klingons of all types now, like Klingon businessmen, like that would not be something in Martok's empire that would be looked down upon. Klingon scientists, Klingon engineers, all of these type of things. There's honor in all of those type of things because we are doing it for the glory of the Empire and using our gifts best for the Empire itself. Not everybody can be a warrior, but it's honorable to serve the Empire by giving it your best. There's even the point where Martok is complaining about the lack of good Klingon medical facilities on ships and their antique equipment, the honor of being able to save warriors who have been in battle, well. So I'm really interested because I think we've had nothing but good things to say about this book. And so I'm fascinated to see, where both of you are going to land then with your ratings for book 2.
I'm going to say that I put off these books for a long time. It's because I wanted to read them, but everything else gets in the way of other books and we're doing on the show and such. But this didn't disappoint. I really enjoyed this. It was actually better than I thought it was going to be. It wasn't that I didn't think it was going to be good. It was just I had no idea how good it was. So, just learning more about the Klingon culture and just seeing... I hesitate to say it this way because I feel like it's wrong, but it makes the Klingons more human. And I don't really want to say it that way, but I mean, it's true. And I think it's fair to say that because it's not that I want the Klingons to be human, but it just means that we're all more alike than we think. We're more alike than we are just not alike is what I'm trying to get at. So just to have those dimensions in the Klingons is great. And Martok, wonderful character, really built upon in this, and all the other characters, and getting more of Ezri, like I said. And the Ferengi Far was a really great character. He came a long way since the first book. Great character growth there. So I will give this book 5 out of 5 battles where one of them turns into a Hark.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. I've never cared too much for Klingon stories in Star Trek, and I think part of it's just the kind of monoculture that we got for a long time until we got further along into Deep Space Nine. But and I read these books a long time ago, but remember nothing about them, and so I'm really glad for this chance to revisit them and enjoy them a lot. And I think having J.G. Hertzler as one of the authors really helped because he embodied Martok on the show, but also knew what the Klingon culture should be. And, with Jeffrey Lang being such a great Star Trek author as well, I mean, I think this was just such a great pairing. And, the writing in this book was just fantastic between the, that gruesome scene where Morjod turns into a Herc, but even the deaths in the book between Cyrilla or what was his name, Derek or whatever, and then even Far when he dies. I mean, those were heartbreaking scenes, but honorable, I guess you could say, if I could use a Klingon word. But yeah, so I think I'm going to give this one a 4.5, and I'll take the other half of your apple from the comic book, but communicators that are completely busted, but Alexander is such a smart guy that he can figure out how to still get data off of them.
Yeah, I mean, that Alexander, I mean, he's just a genius. We just didn't know it. I can't add anything to what you guys have said. I think this is a great duology. I think this book takes what they did in book one and it makes it even better, and really completes the story in a very satisfactory way. I think, it absolutely takes the Klingons and makes them 100% more interesting, just as Deep Space Nine had started that trend. And so I'm right there with you, Casey. This is 4.5 out of 5 Katai members. One was split in half by Batleth, and that's why there's only half left. So
by the sword of Kalis.
He turns into a half Herc. Okay, so Matt, at this point, I think we have covered all of the post-Nemesis books. Is that right?
I think so, Bruce. The only one that I'm trying to think, I think maybe we haven't covered the lives of Dax, but most of those stories take place, not in the 24th century.
Did you guys ever do the Gateways books?
We didn't do the whole series, but we did do the one involved in the Deep Space Nine. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are some out there that we haven't touched. I mean, we haven't done the New Frontier series, and those end up taking place in that. And we never did Starfleet Court of Engineers type of thing.
But some, again, those kind of take place before Nemesis and after, yeah. Indistinguishable whatever by magic.
Yes, but that one doesn't doesn't count. So, yeah. But no, we have done most of them, if not all of them at this point, which is really exciting. And we're going to be going back to Enterprise, which is exciting. We're going to read some Enterprise books soon. And of course, we're continuing on with the New Earth series. But until we get to that, Bruce, if people want to catch up with you and see, what's happening in the land of Bruce Gibson, where can they find you?
Well, in the land of Bruce Gibson, I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. That's Admiral, then the underline Rex. And I'm also on the Positively Trek podcast with Dan Gunther, talking about all things Star Trek, whether it's shows, movies, books, comics, collecting, I don't know. There's other stuff, whatever Star Trek stuff there is. And I guess that's about it. But I just want to say something to one of our associate producers that's not on the show right now, Greg Rosier. I did see you at Star Trek Mission Chicago a couple of times from a distance, and I never got to come over and say hi to you. So I apologize for that. But at least we've hung out in Las Vegas.
And I'll be in Las Vegas this coming August. So maybe I can meet Greg.
You should, yes.
Well, and before that, you can find me on Goodreads, Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram at Knitting Trekkie. I'm also lurking around in the Babel Conference on Facebook, and I'm also on a podcast called Mickey's Marvels, where we discuss everything under the Disney umbrella.
And, of course, you can find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero, all of those places. Of course, here on the network, not only talking Star Trek, but, of course, all the other fandoms we love under the banner, the 602 Club, and so hope you'll check that out. It's a blast. You can also find me doing The Orb, Warp 5, and The Artificial Tango. The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Warp 5 is about Star Trek Enterprise, and The Artificial Tango is about Star Trek Picard. And then, of course, you can find me over on the Nerd Party Network. I've got a finished show I did with Drea Kaufman. We talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. And then, also, you can find me on Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills as we talk about Star Wars. But, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, live long,
and read on.
What do you call that, light reading? To each his own, number one.